Hello and welcome to episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. We are joined today by Jonny Lazarus as we preview and get ready for the Rangers versus Devils first round matchup, the Hudson River rivalry. Johnny, thanks for coming on. How's it going, man?
Good to be back with you, Bubbs. It's been like a couple weeks since we did this, but
Yeah.
best time of year, playoff hockey's it's here, and the weather's nice. No complaints. Best time of year, like I said, it's awesome.
Yeah, it's gonna definitely exciting. It's gonna be a wild postseason ride. Hopefully, a one that ends with the Rangers hoisting the Stanley Cup. It's not gonna be easy. Eastern Conference is loaded. Rangers have a tough path, and it starts obviously Tuesday night at Prudential Center against the Devils. But I guess I just want to start kind of just from a fan perspective in the overall energy and just overall view of this series, where these teams obviously have a pretty big history going back. They've faced 6 times in the postseason, going back to 94 with the Messier guarantee to 2012, where they obviously knocked out the Rangers. That was the last time. It's been 11 years since they've met. The Devils haven't been in the playoffs since 2018. So it's been some time since we've had kind of both these teams having success at the same time. Just from an outside view, before we really get into the nitty gritty of what to expect in the series, just the energy surrounding these two teams as we get ready for Tuesday night.
Well, honestly, I think there's a lot of similarities between the two. Maybe not in the style of play, but just the storylines. I mean, like you said, the Devils have now been out of the playoffs for 5 years. Last year, the Rangers were the same spot. They missed the playoffs for 5 years. They went through somewhat of a rebuild that's gone much quicker than expected. The Devils have a number one overall pick that's been a stud, and Jack Hughes had a breakout year. Rangers have a number one overall pick who isn't, obviously up to par with Hughes, but, a guy that the fans have loved and, hasn't gotten the opportunity that we all want to see. But point aside, they also have a guy who's been in the Norris conversation and Dougie Hamilton this year for the Devils at Fox as always. So, I think the storylines do kind of match up if you're just an outsider that's looking for something to watch. Obviously, the rivalry hasn't been as intense the last couple seasons because the teams weren't very good at the same time. So it's great that it's going to be reborn in this series. And, I think the physicality wasn't necessarily present between these two teams throughout the regular season, but once that puck is dropped on Tuesday night, this game is going to be insanely physical, and both teams are going to try to set the tone. I'm looking at Miles Wood for the Devils and Jacob Trouba for the Rangers to just run around and, like I said, just try to make their mark on the series early, because physicality is going to be the difference in the series. Both teams have a lot of skilled guys that don't like to get hit. So whichever team plays more physical, in my mind, that's the team that's going to prevail. So, like I said, a lot of good storylines. I didn't even mention Igor Shesterkin. I think he's probably going to be the difference maker in this series. Vanacek's had a good year, but not very consistent. So the Devils' goaltending is probably the biggest question mark in the series.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of talent, great fan bases on both sides. Should be an awesome series. And, I'm hoping it ends in 6 for the Rangers, but, I can easily see this one going the distance.
Yeah, Sam, I think it's going to be, as you mentioned, it's tough. It's physical. Two teams that are obviously very talented. The Devils set a team record for wins and I think points this year. So they've had just a phenomenal season. They're at home. You've talked about this. I've seen a little bit as well, like weathering the storm early on.
Yeah.
How do you feel? Again, physicality is big. Guys like Trouba, Lindgren, those type of guys are going to really have to step up. And we've talked about that a couple weeks ago when I had you on about physicality being a big factor throughout the postseason. It's something that the Rangers lack at times, but other times they can obviously bring it. What do the Rangers need to do early on, especially Tuesday, to make sure that they don't fall down early? Devils, they're a young team. They're fast. They're quick. They capitalize on mistakes. They're at home. They, again, since 2018, they haven't been in. What do the Rangers need to do early on to make sure that game one doesn't really get out of hand and the series gets off to on the wrong side of things?
I mean, quite frankly, they got to scare the crap out of Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt. Those two are, pretty unbelievable players. They're small, they're fast, they're shifty, but they're not used to being hit a lot. So I think in order to stop guys that have that skill, you got to take away their time and space. So I don't know which defensemen are going to line up against that line of, Hughes, Bratt, and Timo Meier, who's obviously, someone that shouldn't be forgotten. But the way that Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt play in the offensive zone, like they just wheel around and make plays, and they can score goals. They can do it all. So I think the Rangers have to respect that line a lot. Another guy that stands out too is like Dawson Mercer, who's had a really good year. But, to get those guys off their game, you got to come out and be physical early because, as a former player, and listen, I've never played in a Stanley Cup game, never played in an NHL game, whatever. But at every level of hockey, when you're getting hit, you're about to get hit. And it makes you think
Yeah.
a little bit differently when someone's coming after you. So I think that's what the Rangers have to do early is just set that tone and, get bodies on Hughes and Bratt, because those two are going to be the difference makers for the Devils. They drive the play. They create a lot of chances. So I think that's what the Rangers have to focus on early. Obviously, to your point, I did tweet about weather in the storm, but that goes for every sport, right? Like, I think, most teams and most sports, the fans are energetic for game one of playoffs on their home court, in their home rink, on their home field, whatever you want to call it. So I think the road team needs to just, understand that and settle in. And listen, if you can go into if I'm the Rangers right now, if I'm going into the first period and it's 0-0, it's 1-0, it's 1-1, if it's not a 2-goal game, I like where I'm at. I think the last time these teams met, the Devils went up 2-0 in the first period. It's always tough to come back from that hole, even though people say it's the worst lead in sports or worst lead in hockey. But, the Devil fans are going to be fired up, and, half the arena will probably be Ranger fans too, but, it's just a different atmosphere. It's a different ball game.
Yeah, totally. And you're spot on, especially going down. Like, if they go down first period and they're down 2, even 3-0, that's where it gets ugly. And we saw that last year on the Rangers' perspective was the Rangers got off to that quick start against Pittsburgh, and they were the younger team. They were the quicker team. The Penguins are obviously the more experienced team who missed the playoffs this year for the first time in forever. But we saw that and now the Rangers ended up losing that game, but we saw how a young team can come out. And again, you talked about Bratt and Hughes, and especially Hughes. He's young. Him taking hits early on, he doesn't have much experience to begin with. He has no experience to begin with in the playoffs. To be taking those hits early on, to get rattled early on is huge. Been their best player, set a team record for points this year with 99. We've talked about, again, with the Devils, their speed, but do you feel like the Rangers, in a way, their biggest, advantage over the Devils in this series is the playoff experience, especially with guys like Tarasenko and Kane who have won it all before?
Mm-hmm. It's tough to say, right? Because to me, experience doesn't really matter until later on in the playoffs. I think sometimes you don't know what you don't know. I mean, look at the kid line last year, right? Like, they were the best, not the best line for the Rangers in the entire playoffs, but they were very consistent. They were probably the most consistent line throughout the playoffs. And, they were just going out there and playing. The Rangers didn't have any pressure on them last year. And that's kind of what the Devils have this year, right? They're a team that, wasn't even expected to make the playoffs probably prior to the season. And now they're here, and their, goal is probably just to win a series and beat the Rangers. I mean, obviously every Devil fan wants that, but, I think the reality check is, listen, the Devils window is now opening. They're not expected to win the Stanley Cup this year, but for the Rangers, I think their advantage is just having the goaltending, having the depth. This Rangers team is probably the best roster I've seen for the Rangers in, my lifetime. So I think for them, like, the Rangers are getting scoring from all four lines, right? Like, even the fourth line of, Mott, Vesey, and Gaudreau, like, they can put the puck in the net. So I think having the depth that the Rangers have, which the Devils somewhat lack. I mean, their fourth line's not too bad either, of Bastian, Lazar, and Wood, but they don't really put up points. So for the Rangers, if, Mika and Panarin and, the top guys aren't scoring, you still look at that third line matchup of, the kid line and then the fourth line matchup, like I said, with those guys before. I think that's the advantage the Rangers have, this overall team depth. So, I didn't even mention Shesterkin. I think he's really the X factor in this specific series, not the entire playoffs, because the Rangers will face better goaltending as they go on. Like next round, if they win and the Islanders win, it'll be Shesterkin versus Sorokin, or, Freddie Anderson, two strong defensive teams. So I think for this round specifically, Igor has to be at his best.
Yeah, I totally agree. Are you, I guess, again, I do agree that the Rangers have the upper hand when it comes to the goaltending, but do you feel like Igor is just going to have an overall better series than he had last year? You think last year was mostly just the jitters, the first time being in the postseason where he had that rough Pittsburgh series? Do you expect him to just come out and be a lot more settled and just be the Igor Shesterkin we've seen him be throughout the regular season?
I would hope so. He's really picked up his game lately too. Last year, honestly, I'm kind of blanking on how he was playing going into playoffs last year. I feel like he obviously didn't really have many letdowns, so he was probably at his best. But, I look at the last 6 starts that Igor's had. He's got a 1.82 goals against average and a .939 save percentage. So he's at the top of his game right now. And I would expect that throughout the playoffs. But, I think a big thing for him was going into that road environment in Pittsburgh and, like, really experiencing what it's like to be taunted for the first time. And that's tough for anyone. So, I think that'll be something that's a little more settling this time around, going into a road rink that, has probably 40% Ranger fans, which would be a nice thing for him. Like I expect to hear a ton of Igor chants in that building on Tuesday.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure that'll make him feel pretty good. But yeah, I think it's definitely sustainable this year.
Yeah, definitely. I agree, and I hope he comes out. I mean, geez, a shutout in game one would be huge, something like
Yeah.
that. But that's probably shooting a little too far. Just got to keep expectations, I guess, a little bit more tempered. But to really kind of take a dive in here to what the Devils do and their speed, and they take advantage of turnovers, especially neutral zone, and the way they get in transition, they're hard to stop. And when they get into transition and they're fast, and you got guys like Jack Hughes and all those type of goal scorers, just from a Rangers perspective, what do they need to do to stop the turnovers, to not have these turnovers and the speed that the Devils bring? How do the Rangers, combat that come the series?
Well, it's all neutral zone. The Rangers have to clog up the neutral zone, and if the Devils enter the blue line clean, they're going to make plays, and that's what they're going to do. They're going to score off the rush, like everyone knows what they're able to do. So you got to be strong in the neutral zone. You can't really check forward, and you can't, dive bomb and lunge at these guys. You got to stay back. You got to contain. You got to control the neutral zone, because if you force the Devils to dump pucks, it's going to get them off their game. And I think that's the biggest thing for the Rangers. And they're not necessarily known to be a strong neutral zone team. They don't really score a lot of goals off the forecheck, but the Rangers do transition really well. So if the Rangers are able to force turnovers in the neutral zone specifically, because that's where the Devils really make all their plays. It's Jack Hughes going with speed, or Jesper Bratt coming up with speed through the neutral zone and, leading a rush and starting a play. So I think that's where the Rangers really do need to be strong, because if they allow the Devils to enter the zone cleanly, it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, definitely. And then you get into those odd man rushes, and it's ugly. And with, again, a young, speedy team, Bratt, Hughes, those guys, that's really what the Devils do. You feel like you kind of get that feeling where, again, we talk about the Rangers with their depth and their goaltending both being advantages over the Devils. Do you feel if the Rangers can kind of stop the Devils from those, the transition hockey and getting out, past the neutral zone and into the offensive zone with speed, if they can contain that, do you feel pretty confident with the way, in the Rangers taking care of business in this series? Because that's really what the Devils heavily rely on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really confident in the Rangers this series, overall. It's more so just what the Devils do that is, a weakness of the Rangers, which is that team speed, right? The Rangers aren't really an in-your-face type of team, so it's hard to really take away time and space from a skilled team like the Devils and a team that has so much speed like the Devils that'll make you pay, obviously, if you make those mistakes. So the little things like that aren't necessarily what's going to make this series fall to the Devils. I think it's all the little things adding up. Like, the Devils' power play obviously is really strong. For example, if the Rangers play on discipline, that's going to be a problem. The Rangers don't have the best PK, but, I think there's so many little things that, that add up. It's not necessarily one area that will cost the Rangers. And maybe that's like, somewhat of a cop-out answer, but it's just truly, all those things that lead to goals. Typically a goal is happened from three mistakes that are made. It's a missed check, or someone doesn't have their man, or a turnover, and all three of those things happen at once. That's kind of how it goes. But, I would think it's all the little things adding up for the Rangers, or adding up for the Devils, sorry, that made the Devils win this series. So, I don't think it's going to be one little detail.
Yeah, I would tend to agree too. Again, the Rangers just have to go out and play their game. And if they do that, I think, again, I feel confident either way going into this series, especially with all the things that we do have in our favor. Just one other thing to note with this Ranger team, I guess, is at times, again, we've seen them overpass a lot, where they just pass too much and they just don't do that. Do you kind of expect that to continue to happen here, or do you hope that they can just shoot the puck at times where they don't tend to do that?
I mean, I hope they're shoot first or shot first mentality, but I know that they're not going to be.
Yeah.
I think I've watched this team enough to understand that that's just how they play hockey. And listen, the Rangers, they had the 16th highest shots on goal per game, 31.5, which like typically is a good amount, but they're not known to shoot the puck. I think that's something that the Devils are much better at. They get a lot of shots on goal per game too. But I think, the Rangers have to play their brand of hockey, because that's what got them here and that's what is going to get them through the playoffs. But they also have to limit those mistakes. I don't think it would be smart for the Rangers to completely change their style and play like a dump and chase style. I think they're a team that makes plays and scores goals and, has the ability to make those flashy plays. But to that same point, it's just, time and place, I guess, or moderation on when to make the extra pass. I think back to that goal, I think in game 2 of the Ranger Tampa series when Fox went backdoor to Kako, Adam Fox could have easily took that shot. But, if there's one person I'm not yelling at to shoot the puck, it's Adam Fox.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's too sometimes a little bit on the power play where sometimes they can get a little too overpassing. But I mean, this is a team that I believe last year in the postseason too, we had a good amount of power play success, even with some of the times where we passed a lot. But that is the way the Rangers played, as you mentioned. They've been like this forever, going back many, many years now. They've just always been kind of a pass first team. So I guess to kind of just close things out here, overall, just your final thoughts on what to expect in this series, and then your prediction on who you got moving on.
Yeah. So I think, the Rangers, the first period of game 1 is going to be huge. I expect the Devils to come out and be the better team early on, but I think the Rangers settle into their game. I think the Devils might win game 1. That's kind of just my gut feeling right now, is the Devils do take game 1, but I think the Rangers climb back and they find a way. And my expectation right now is that they split at home, like in New Jersey, in New York. I think it's going to be a 2-2 series. And I do think the Rangers will win game 5, win game 6, and close it out. That's my prediction, is Rangers in 6. And it's going to be very back and forth. I don't think there's going to be any games that are a blowout necessarily. And if there is one, it's probably going to be in the Devils' favor. I'm not trying to sound so negative here, because I do think the Rangers are going to win the series, but this team can scratch and claw, and they can find their way back. And, if Igor has an off game, I trust him to bounce back. So
yeah,
I just think the emotion in game 1 is going to be very high for New Jersey. And, the Rangers will be able to settle in and figure it out. But let's remember that, this team has only really had, 30-ish games as a roster with, Tarasenko and Kane. Obviously, those are huge additions. So it might take a little bit more time to settle into the series, where the Devils, made one move for Timo Meier, but he's been like somewhat of a perfect fit there. So, I think, I said it. So Rangers in 6, but Devils should push early on.
Yeah, I agree. I'm on board with you. We're going Rangers. I think there's a good chance it goes the distance. I think there's definitely a chance it goes 7. But again, like the Devils, as we've talked about a lot, they're that young team. They're fast. They could potentially, as much as we don't want this to happen, and again, to kind of say what you said, I don't want to sound negative, but they could potentially be like the Rangers were last year. As said at the earlier in the show, where not many people think they're going to win. They beat a good team. They beat an experienced team like the Rangers did against Pittsburgh. And then it could almost be similar paths, because then what they would get Carolina or the Islanders up next. So if they get Carolina, then, or the Islanders, whatever, that's another experienced team. So they could definitely make some noise and get to the Eastern Conference Finals just like the Rangers did. So that is something to look out for. It is something that, although it would be awful, I wouldn't be shocked if that happened, if the Devils do make a run like the Rangers did, because it's just two very similar teams. But I think the Rangers, and just the way they do things, that the positives, I think, outweigh what the Devils do well as well. I think my biggest concern is the speed, obviously, of the Devils, and I'm hoping that Igor obviously comes out and plays really well too. So I'm going to go Rangers. I'll say 7. I'll say it goes the distance. They win it on the road, and we'll move on. But to close things out here, tell everybody kind of what you're doing. I know you got obviously new thing you're doing with the hockey news. So tell everybody what you're doing there, all your social media stuff, and to kind of close it out here.
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't know if my heart could handle a game 7 in this series. So if you stand Rangers in 7, I don't know if both sides. I don't know if anyone in this rivalry can handle that. That'll be a lot, but it'll be fun. That's for sure. And yeah, you can follow me at my stuff. I post it all on Twitter, JLazzy23. I write for the Hockey News covering the Rangers, which I started like 2 weeks ago. So, I'm in the press box in the locker room after games, like asking questions to the players and whatnot. And then I do the Blue Crew podcast. I do it with my friend Cody Frankel, and we have Avery Zaretsky joining the show now. So that'll be cool. Excited to get started with him going forward for the playoffs. But yeah, just pretty much all on Twitter. And Bubbs, thank you as always, man. It's always fun talking to you. And hopefully we can do this again after the Rangers win the Cup.
Yeah, same to you. It's been awesome. Hopefully this is the start of many playoff games. Hopefully this is the start of a cup run, and at the end, hopefully it's we're hoisting it for the first time since since 94. So as always, thank you all so much for watching. Enjoy the postseason. Should be a lot of fun, a lot more content coming your way. As always, hope you enjoyed it. Let's go Rangers, and thanks for listening.